Hello, my name is James Trost, and this is A2Insight. Today's guest is Elizabeth Nelson.
Hello.
Hello, nice to meet you. Elizabeth is running for Ward 4 for the Ann Arbor City Council. We're very excited about learning more about you and some of the issues that you believe are important for us here in the Ward 4 of Ann Arbor and Ann Arbor at large. So would you please start out by just giving us a little bit about your background, growing up, what your early influences were, your education, your family, and let us get to know you a little bit up until we get to learn more about your interest in running for Ann Arbor City Council. So,
sure. So my name is Elizabeth Nelson, and I grew up in a suburb of Chicago, and I went to college at Rutgers in New Jersey, and then I went to law school at the University of Maryland in Baltimore. And when I met my husband, he's what brought me to Michigan. I came here and I had passed the Michigan bar in 2000. And about midway through law school, I had a sense that I really probably did not want to practice law, even though I was very interested in the politics of how policy impacts people's lives. And so shortly after passing the bar exam, my husband's job actually took us abroad. And so we lived in England for 4 years, and my older son was born there. And then we moved back in 2004, and I had my younger son here in Ann Arbor. And I've been involved in my community, volunteering with organizations like the American Association of University Women, the Ann Arbor Thrift Shop, working at my kids' schools, first as volunteer, and then I went back to school a couple of years ago and I got my certification to teach. And the last 2 years I've been working as a long-term substitute, primarily long-term and short-term. When a teacher has to be gone for a long time, they have to hire a certified teacher, and so that might be me. And I was between jobs this spring when I was following City Council and following discussion of the Y lot, and when I was reading paperwork related to the litigation and watching how City Council discussion was going on, it really concerned me because I felt like issues were oversimplified, and it would probably help for more people to be on council who had a little bit more background and understanding of legal issues. And I realize also that the reason that lawyers quite often go into politics is because this is a skill set. This is a set of information that is so relevant to our government. And so I'm running for City Council because I'm hoping to be a more independent voice who's interested in discussing issues in a complex way. I'll know what kinds of questions to ask our city attorneys when we're wrestling with issues, and I think I have something to contribute.
well, that's certainly, I was going to ask you why you decided to run, and this is definitely a good motivation. You, with your background, law, a lot of lawyers do end up going into politics and understanding legal issues as they relate to, certainly that's a truism with anything dealing with government. But what's it like, and as I said, you're new to politics, what is it like, and what does it entail to actually run for Ann Arbor City Council and local politics? What are you doing with your time to get your name out of there, and what's it like to run for office?
Well, in the beginning, I have to say I was reluctant to pursue this for a long time, only because I moved here in 2004, and I think folks know that there are a lot of townies here who've grown up in Ann Arbor and lived here for decades, and so every time I read about our local politics and saw issues or read about discussion that didn't make sense to me, I always sort of told myself, well, there must be background or context that I'm not quite grasping because I haven't lived here long enough. So I say all of that to explain that the first few weeks that after I had declared my candidacy, I really tried to introduce myself to as many people as I could to familiarize myself with issues that people really focus on. There are pockets of people that are particularly focused on, for instance, the lower town zoning and the new development out there. There are people who are really, really focused on the Fuller Road train station as an issue. These pockets of people who are really have done all their research on issues like the Zorro rezoning formatting. These are the people that I needed to talk to so that I could better understand these issues. And so that was the first few weeks of campaigning. And then when I felt like I had a grasp of the issues more clearly, I was very interested in hearing what residents had to say. And so mostly campaigning lately has been knocking on doors and introducing myself to people and asking them what their concerns are. And I've learned a lot from the conversations that I've had. I've been biking all over town to all the different corners of the ward, all the different neighborhoods, understanding the little niche issues that are affecting residents in certain little pockets of the city that, you know, the people who live in the neighborhood around Dickens School, they're the only ones who know about the crumbling path between Runnymede and Pauline. I didn't know about that path. My children didn't go to Dickens. I didn't use that path. These are the things that a candidate should understand and know about so that they know what the kinds of things they're going to be advocating for when they're on council representing residents.
Well, that's good to know. Just, you know, having been in this town on and off for many years and consider myself a townie, I can still remember that the issue of potholes is something we were talking about back in 1973. So there's certain issues that, regardless of your longevity of being in this town, that just seem to go on forever. And so that does kind of lead me to some specific issues that, from my opinion, I think for most of our residents, they always are discussions. They're also resolutions. We come up with some potential decisions, and then they're still in discussion. So we do have some movement on specific issues, and I'd like to get your opinions on them. Why don't we just start with a biggie this season, which would be both the library lot sale to core spaces and the buyback of the Dahlman property. And what are your views on this, and what do you hope to contribute if you are successful in your attempt to be on our city council with those two specific issues?
Well, the Y lot was probably the trigger that prompted me to run in the first place, and I feel like it's a symbol of what we're lacking in terms of long-term strategic thinking. That property sat for 4 years with not a lot going on, and then when councils talked about buying it back, we had sort of 4 different ideas that got bounced around really quickly. Like, first we were going to buy it back and sell it and make a pile of money. Then we were going to buy it back and put affordable housing in it. Then we were going to, maybe we were going to make it part of the library. You know, it sort of surprises me that our leaders who had been sitting in council for that long while it was doing nothing don't have a clearer idea. I hope that that property is able to be developed in some way that incorporates affordable housing. I think that would be helpful for us. I worry about the process that has happened recently with that property, and moving forward, my understanding is that the last decision on council is we're kicking the can down the road again, and we're going to spend 4 more months talking about it, which we should be talking about it, but a lot of time has gone by. The library lot concerns me because I feel like right now we have 2 very extreme choices. The core spaces proposal is 17 stories, and in talking to residents, I think I could count on one hand the number of people who have told me they're really excited about how big that is. And then we have another option, which is this referendum to turn it into a public space, which will then we lose the revenue of selling it, and then we are on the hook for maintenance of it. And quite honestly, I think the referendum probably would not be an issue now if we had struck a better deal in the first place, a development that was less shocking to people. And I think that's something that we're wrestling with as a city. And it's an issue that's been polarized a lot. When I first pulled petitions and I explained to people that I was running for office, it was explained to me that we have these 2 sides, people who want us to go in a time machine and make Ann Arbor like it was 30 years ago, and people who want a skyscraper everywhere. And I'm seeing neither side of that debate. I've not met anyone who doesn't acknowledge that our city is growing. I've not met anyone who is determined to stop development in its tracks. I think we just need to find that middle ground where we aren't infuriating our residents with a 17-story proposal in the heart of downtown, so much so that they want to have a referendum to make it a public plaza. We could find better solutions, and that's what I'm interested in looking for.
All right, well, that hopefully will move forward. I mean, I think even I read recently that you've got a couple of council members suing their own city to try to prevent that from happening. So there are certain different methods going on to try to prevent this project from going forward. We do have the referendum, which I think is a healthy thing for a community. Let's move on to another issue that's kind of been on the block for many years, and that would be the Amtrak station. And again, or an expansion of the Amtrak station. We've done everything from studies to proposals, a lot of money spent on trying to figure out where would this go. There's always issues in this community about public land being utilized for private purposes or whatever. Where do you have what is your opinion on where we go with either a resite or upgrading of the current station? How do you feel about this increase of rail capability for Ann Arbor?
Well, first of all, I'd say that this issue has been oversimplified by some people who are trying to characterize opposition to the Fuller Road station as somehow opposition to commuter rail generally, and I don't think that that's accurate or true. The reservations that people have about the Fuller Road station that I share are all of the arguments for why that location is the best one, and the process that we use to arrive at that conclusion. The federal government kicked back our proposal or our request for funds because they said that we did not properly look at alternatives and we didn't address public concerns about that property. And the studies, I understand, demonstrated that most of the staff that are coming into the medical center are actually coming from the north. So arguments that that location is better to serve the needs of the medical center staff are not true. It was a missed opportunity in terms of the DTE site. I wonder why that was not pursued as an alternate location. And like I said, the federal government said that we didn't put in enough research in terms of other options. So I guess my question is why the city landed on this as the best one. Because it's going to change the use of some parkland that, yes, admittedly is not being used as parkland right now. It's a parking lot, but it's a slippery slope when we start converting land that has been set aside. So my reservation about the Fuller Road station is about the location. It's about the details attached to it. It is not about commuter rail generally. Transit is important. And I think it's true that probably a lot of people in this town, like me, have lived in communities that are well served by commuter rail. And so it's not that we don't understand the value of it. It's just we are interested in being clear about the details of how it's going to serve Ann Arbor in the best possible way.
Well, that's encouraging. The other thing I want to mention, you touched a little bit on this, and that's the DTE proposal. And I, for one, am kind of excited about the potential of a waterfront development. And I lived in Minneapolis and St. Paul for many years, and most communities along the Mississippi River, communities kind of have some access to the actual river. Here, if you're not on a kayak, you're probably not getting a sense of the water and taking advantage of the river, because we are river people. We live on the. What do you feel about we're looking at, they're talking about putting $80 million of this land and dealing with some of the, this land is basically sat there. How do you feel about this kind of development? It's private development at this point. How do you feel about that? Because it will certainly be coming for the council as it relates to zoning and some of the construction areas. Are you in favor of the DTE expansion at this point on that area?
I think it's exciting. I don't know many details, but like you, I lived in Baltimore where we made excellent use of the harbor in a way that hadn't been before. In the 80s, my understanding is Baltimore was kind of a disaster and their harbor was like sort of a waste. It wasn't utilized the way it should have been. I'm excited about it, and I'm hoping that the process for planning is able to include enough input so that residents don't feel like something's forced through, the devil's in the details, obviously.
Well, and that is, I think, going back to what you're saying, I think most of us who observe local politics are, we never, as I said, nothing ever seems to get resolved, and then there's, as you mentioned about this rail, certain things weren't done with the Amtrak station, and in terms of the proposal, why wasn't it done? And again, nobody seems to be accountable for it, other than it's yet another study and it gets kicked down the road. But this does lead to something which I think most residents, and has been issues for years in this community, and that's the whole concept. And we can say affordable housing in this community. We can talk about having people working in the service industry that most of them cannot afford to live here now, and they're commuting either on the bus system or coming into town. And I wanted to people know I did have an interview with your opponent running for this, and one of his major goals is he says he wants affordable housing in this community. How do you achieve affordable housing in a community that, at the same time, we want it to be affordable? If I'm a homeowner in this county, I like my home prices to rise. So how do you? I mean, how do you do? You can't just say you're in for affordable housing. What are the concrete steps other than subsidization of people's properties to get less people with lesser incomes to be in our community?
Well, there are a couple of things, and you're right that everybody is saying that they're in favor of affordable housing, and the question is, how committed are we to get there? And this was one of my concerns about discussion related to the Y lot. It's the follow-through. It's easy to say that you're in favor of it, and it's more difficult to achieve. We had an opportunity in the Lower Town development for PUD where you can negotiate with a developer.
Excuse me, could you say what PUD, could you
It's
define that
it's
as?
a public use development where a developer is given some concessions in terms of the zoning parameters, and in exchange for those zoning concessions, the city can negotiate things like more units of affordable housing. And we had an opportunity for a PUT in Lower Town that we abandoned. And it's unfortunate because it was a development that was well received by the residents. It was something that would have been accepted by the neighborhood, and the neighbors were pleased about it. And we let it slip away. And now there's a by right development that's in the pipeline it doesn't have the affordable housing that would have been in the PUD. And it's disappointing. I think one of the other things that we can do is find a steady stream of funding a consistent stream of funding for the Ann Arbor Housing Commission, and that is something that the City Council has failed to do. And so I guess the point that you raised in terms of being a homeowner, yes, we all benefit from our home prices increasing, but we need to take a look at the people who live here right now, as well as the people who would like to live here. And so there are a lot of issues that have come before council recently that are going to impact how expensive it is for people on a fixed income to live in Ann Arbor. And all of these things are connected. Somebody who's 80 years old and really wants to remain in their house and can't afford to, I mean, is that what we mean by affordable, or is it somebody who doesn't live here yet and would like to move in? It's probably both of these things. Our community benefits from having a range of ages, a range of socioeconomic levels. Like, that is part of what makes our community vibrant.
One of the differences this year, for those who are not familiar, is that all of the candidates running for office now are going for 4-year terms as opposed to 2. This used to be and one of the issues is that our community is known as probably a weak mayor model. A lot of the power really is with the city administrator. And this year we also have a contested mayoral election for the first time in several years. So I guess my question to you is, have you made a decision as who you would like to support running either the incumbent, Christopher Taylor, or Councilmember Jack Eaton for their upcoming election? Have you made a decision yet?
I have, and my husband jokes that in answering this question, I should always clarify that Mayor Christopher Taylor is actively campaigning for my opponent, and that this would influence my decision. And I say that that's a shallow way of looking at it. Quite honestly, I do support Jack Eaton, not because I agree with every position that he takes, but because I believe Mayor Taylor has, as a leader of our city council, has built a climate where we are not having thoughtful discussions. We have 3 or 4 members of council who want to ask thoughtful questions about important issues that are going to impact people in a serious way, like the water rates. And again, it's suggested that, many people have looked at this before and we should just sort of rubber stamp it and let it go through, and let's not ask questions, or maybe not let's not ask questions, but it's not up to us to question this. And my feeling is that city council is where the buck is supposed to stop. It's the last place. And so if city council is inclined to just say, well, other people have looked at this before, they're really abdicating their responsibility. I'm interested in seeing lively discussion, and I think that if we had Jack Eaton as mayor, I think we would have serious discussion. I think he would encourage that, and I'm sure that I would disagree with him a lot.
Well, I'm sure he'll look forward to that. I'll be talking to him not too distant future. And this does kind of lead to, we have choices as voters. We all believe, we love our community, we want to see us succeed, and certainly there are endless number of communities that would be envious of our problems, actually, in terms of the advantages of having the University of Michigan here and some of the other unique aspects. But then the other question is, how do I know you're running, you have an opponent, an incumbent? Graydon Crapole is your challenger, and you're challenging each other. You're challenging him, of course. And I guess the question is, we want to know why this is we're both competing for the same seat. So I guess the question would be, what distinguishes you, or what do you bring to the table that would be more advantageous for the Ward 4 voters than re-electing Councilmember Crapole?
I guess what I would say is that I think everybody who's met me and had a conversation with me knows this about me. I am someone who asks questions and wants to look at all sides of an issue. I'm really not interested in passing off my responsibility as a council person representing the ward with statements like, well, I can see how this is how it's always been done, or yeah, this makes sense to me because the people who talked about it, they spent a lot of time figuring this out. The thing that happens at that council table that is unique to a council person are the remarks that start with, my residents are concerned about, or my residents are telling me that. And those are the statements that I'm not hearing right now on council, not as much as I would like. And so what I'm pledging to the residents of the residents of Ward 4 is my willingness to hear what your positions are, hear what your concerns are, hear what your perspectives are, and make sure that those perspectives have a voice at the table.
No, that would be great to hear, because I do think sometimes, and this is a major complaint that most people have with our current situation, is that the factions, this word faction that constantly comes up.
Yeah.
You've got folks that are supportive of the mayor, then you've got people who are predictably, you said you want to be an independent voice, and I guess the question would be, politics is an art, it's not a science. Let's assume that you are successful. You're still going to have a variety of folks that we're going to be in different camps. And I guess the question is, how do you, it's a finesse thing, and you're going to represent us, but how are you going to work with some of these folks who literally are, we run into this every time. It's almost a split like we have in federal government and everything else. How are you going to make a difference there?
So what I've met a lot of the people who are challenging incumbents this go round, and one of the things that we have in common, we don't see things the same way, but one of the things that we have in common is that we're concerned about how discussion has been stifled at the council table. I think the water rates discussion is a really good example of where we're going to...
Excuse me, could you expand upon what is the water rates discussion?
The water rates, the city council just passed a resolution to change our water rates so that the fee structuring is changing in a radical way, and it's complicated, and it's just to sum it up, costs are shifting. Fees are going up for some customers, and they're going a little bit down for some customers, and it's a bit controversial, but it was a very long presentation from the consulting group that had formulated this structuring system. It was like 25 pages of PowerPoint, and it was just passed last week, and it wouldn't have even been discussed last week if we didn't have a few members of council who were really pushing to delay discussion, or to delay the decision for more discussion. This is where I think if we are able to strike a different balance on council, if some of our incumbents are beaten, if we have new faces on council, I think you're going to see a lot more situations where a discussion is carried over to another meeting because there's an understanding we didn't address every side of this. I mean, in the last discussion of the water rates, Sumi Kalasapathy was some kind of superhero with all of the accounting questions that she had. Did you crunch the numbers? Did you consider factoring in fees this way or calculating fees this way? And 2 or 3 times the response was, well, no, we simply didn't crunch those numbers. So what we had was a single proposal that the question was to vote up or down. And like I said, I think those of us who are challenging incumbents, by and large, we are really interested in digging deep and understanding these issues from all sides so that we have more than one option on the table. And it's not a question of, well, though, like we've got these 6 people who are voting for it, and so those 3 or 4 are just obstructionists because they're voting against it. Well, quite often the 3 or 4 who look like obstructionists, they're just trying to understand, is there a different way? And what are the alternatives? And I think that's important for our city government to be considering different options.
Oh, good. Well, let's assume that you are successful, not only in the primary, but of course the general election that will take place in November. And you've spent time not only going around and meeting with the folks, learning about the towns versus the gown, the university community versus the regular other community. And then 4 years ago, you're knocking on my door. And I'm going to say, all right, you've been there after 4 years. And again, we're hopeful that you'll be able to resolve some of these things we're discussing. But then I guess I would say to you, thank you so much, Council Member Nelson, for your work. What did you specifically achieve in the last 4 years on council, so when you come back, hopefully looking for re-election, that you can say to the voters, it's going to be different this time than endless discussions, endless potential resolutions, and everything else being kicked down for yet another 4 years. So what do you want to achieve that you can honestly look and say, I did this because you elected me, and I'm proud to come back and knock on your door again for my re-election, if you're not running for Congress or Senate after this?
So I guess what I hope to be able to say to you is I've been part of a group on council that have successfully gotten the dioxin plume identified as a Superfund site, so we're getting federal help in addressing that problem. We are much closer, because I don't know how long it'll take, hopefully maybe in 4 years. We've gotten much closer to standardizing our crosswalks, so we don't have 5 different versions, with some with twinkly lights and some with hawk signs. And I'd like to be able to tell you that we've improved our planning process and added a couple extra steps, or enhanced the notification requirements for neighbors, maybe increase the distance for new developments so that residents feel like they have a stronger voice, a meaningful voice in terms of the things that are being built around the city. So we don't have more surprises, or not surprises, so much as just unpleasantness, like the game day condos that caught Berkeley Avenue by surprise, and they were always just a couple steps behind in terms of getting their concerns heard before everything was approved by first Planning Commission and then Council. And I'd like to be able to say that I've advocated for specific infrastructure issues that are affecting Ward 4, like the resident on Greenview who told me about her rusty water that comes out of her tap. Hopefully maybe we can replace the pipes on Greenview like was done in the few blocks east of there. Hopefully we can replace that crumbling path between Runnymede and Pauline. Hopefully I've been able to advocate for residents who live behind the George on Packard if they need traffic calming measures, if they have concerns about other issues related to all of those residents moving in. These are things that we don't know are going to happen we don't know what's going to happen in the next 4 years in a lot of these situations, and I think I would be a very strong representative for Ward 4, listening to your concerns and advocating for them.
Elizabeth Nelson is running for Ann Arbor City Council. The primary takes place in August. Information, if you want to learn more about her campaign, we will have her website at the end of our program now, which of course we're coming to. I want to thank you very much for coming in and explaining to our viewers your views and some of the issues that are confronted by our community, and we wish you the best of luck in your upcoming race. For A2 Insight, until next time, I'm James Trost.